Hello and welcome. You're here now, settling into the quiet of your evening. The day behind you, the night ahead, and this moment right here where nothing needs to happen except rest. There is a quiet process happening right now, somewhere behind your eyes and beneath your thoughts. It has been happening every night of your life, without any effort on your part, without any need to understand it or direct it. Tonight, we are simply going to listen to it together. This is a narration about the brain at the end of a day, about the slow, unhurried way it prepares for sleep. Not a dramatic story, not a puzzle to solve, just a gentle walk through something your body already knows how to do. You don't need to follow along carefully. There is nothing to remember. If your attention drifts, that is perfectly fine. That drifting is, in fact, part of what this narration is about. The brain is a remarkable thing, and one of its most remarkable qualities is this: it knows when to let go. After hours of processing light and sound, making decisions, holding conversations, carrying the small weight of ordinary thoughts, it reaches a point, sometime in the evening, where it simply begins to release all of that, gradually, gently. The way a hand slowly opens when it's no longer needed to hold something. Scientists have studied this process for decades, and what they've found is both deeply complex and in a way deeply reassuring. The brain doesn't stop all at once. It winds down in stages, each one quieter than the last. It's less like a light being switched off, and more like a house at the end of the evening. One room going dark, then another, until only the softest, most essential things remain. That is where we are headed tonight. Through each of those rooms, one at a time, with no hurry at all. So if you are already comfortable, already still, that is exactly where you are meant to be. The brain's long, slow journey towards sleep has likely already begun. And for the next little while, all that is needed is to let the words drift in, the way sounds do when you are almost, but not quite, asleep. Somewhere deep inside the brain, in a small cluster of cells no larger than a grain of rice, something began to change earlier this evening. This tiny structure is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It sits quietly at the base of the brain, and its only purpose is to track time, to know with remarkable accuracy where the day is in its long arc from morning to night. It does this mostly by reading light. Through the eyes, through the optic nerves, signals about the quality and brightness of light travel inward, and the suprachiasmatic nucleus listens. In the morning, when light is strong and full of certain wavelengths, it signals the rest of the brain to be alert, to be ready. And then, as the afternoon softens into evening, as light grows warmer and lower and less intense, something in that small cluster of cells begins to shift. It doesn't happen all at once. It's very gradual. A slow turning, like the way a season changes. Not in a single day, but across many small, almost imperceptible steps. One of the first things this shift sets in motion is the release of melatonin. Melatonin comes from a small gland near the center of the brain called the pineal gland. And as evening deepens, the pineal gland begins, quietly, to release melatonin into the bloodstream. Not in a rush, not as a signal to fall asleep immediately, more like a slow, steady message, a reminder sent through the whole body that the day is ending and it is safe to begin letting go. Melatonin is often thought of as a sleep hormone, but that description is a little too simple. It doesn't cause sleep the way a switch causes a light to turn off. It's more like a dimmer, something that very gradually lowers the overall level of alertness that makes wakefulness a little less effortful to release. The body receives this signal, and something in it responds, almost without noticing. Around this same time, another change is happening in a different part of the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the region just behind the forehead, responsible for planning, for reasoning, for holding complex thoughts in place, begins to ease its activity. During the day, the prefrontal cortex works constantly. It organizes, it evaluates, it keeps track of what needs to happen next. But as evening comes and melatonin rises, the prefrontal cortex gradually loosens its grip on all of that. Thoughts become a little less sharp, a little less purposeful. The mind may still wander through the events of the day, or drift towards something that happened, or circle gently around a thought without really landing anywhere. This is natural. This is the prefrontal cortex stepping back, no longer insisting on clarity or direction. And as it does, the brain's electrical activity begins to slow as well. During waking hours, the brain produces what scientists call beta waves, small, fast, frequent oscillations of electrical activity. These are the waves of alertness, of attention, of active thought. But as the evening shift continues, as melatonin rises and the prefrontal cortex softens, those beta waves begin to give way to something slower, something called alpha waves. Alpha waves are broader, more relaxed. They tend to appear when the eyes are closed, when the mind is not focused on any particular task, when the body is at rest. They are sometimes described as a kind of pleasant looseness. Not sleepiness exactly, but a gentle release of the effort it takes to stay sharp and awake. Many people feel this transition without knowing what it is. A slight heaviness behind the eyes, a sense that thoughts are moving a little more slowly, a little less urgently. A feeling that the boundaries of the room, of the day, of everything that needed attention have softened just slightly at the edges. This is the brain beginning its long, unhurried process of winding down. Nothing is being forced. Nothing is being switched off. It is simply beginning, the way evening itself begins, without a clear starting point, as a gradual deepening of something that was already quietly in motion. The nervous system has two general states, not opposites exactly, but two different modes, two different ways of being in the world. One is active and alert. It responds to demands, to movement, to anything that requires attention or quick action. Scientists call this the sympathetic state. During the day, it is often gently engaged, not in any dramatic way, just present, just ready. It keeps the heart beating at a brisk pace, keeps the muscles slightly prepared, keeps the senses tuned to the environment. The other state is quieter. It is associated with rest, with digestion, with the kind of ease that comes when there is nothing urgent to respond to. This is called the parasympathetic state. And as the evening deepens, as melatonin continues its slow rise and the brain's activity gradually softens, the parasympathetic state begins, very gently, to take over. This shift doesn't feel like much from the inside. It isn't dramatic, but it is happening steadily and reliably in the background of everything. One of the first places it becomes noticeable is in the heart. The heart rate slows, not suddenly, but gradually, one beat at a time, settling into a slightly longer rhythm. And breathing changes too. The breath deepens a little, spaces out a little. There is a bit more time between each inhale and exhale, a quiet expansion, and then a quiet release. The brain notices this. It receives continuous signals from the heart and lungs, from the body's internal state, and it interprets what it finds there. A slower heart, a deeper breath, These are signals of safety. They tell the brain, in a language older than words, that there is nothing to respond to right now, that the environment is calm, that it is safe to continue letting go. And so the brain responds in kind by relaxing its own vigilance a little further. Deep within the brainstem, there is a small region called the locus ceruleus. During waking hours, the locus ceruleus releases a chemical called norepinephrine, a substance that promotes alertness, that sharpens attention, that keeps the brain responsive to whatever might be happening around it. In moments of stress or urgency, the locus ceruleus becomes more active. But in the evening, as the body settles and the parasympathetic state takes hold, the locus ceruleus begins to quiet. Less norepinephrine, less urgency, less of the subtle background hum of vigilance that runs through a waking day. The world doesn't disappear. Sounds can still be heard. Sensations can still be felt. But they carry less weight now. They seem a little further away. The locus ceruleus is no longer insisting that everything be noticed and evaluated and responded to. It is, very slowly, standing down. Alongside all of this, the muscles of the body are releasing tension that accumulated through the day. This too is gradual and mostly unconscious. The small muscles around the eyes soften. The jaw loosens slightly. The shoulders, the hands, the long muscles of the back. They all carry a kind of low-level readiness during waking hours, a preparedness for movement. And as the parasympathetic nervous system takes over, that readiness slowly drains away. The brain receives this information too. Relaxed muscles send their own quiet message that the body is no longer preparing to act, no longer bracing for anything. And each of these messages reinforces the others. The slower breath reassures the brain, which allows the muscles to soften further, which signals back to the nervous system that rest is safe, which slows the breath a little more. It is a slow, self-reinforcing process, each part of the system responding to the others, each signal making the next one a little easier. Sensory experience changes as well. Sounds that might have felt sharp or present earlier in the evening begin to seem more distant now. Not because they are actually quieter, but because the brain is simply giving them less attention, processing them with less urgency. The edges of things soften. The details of the room, of any remaining light, of the feeling of the surface beneath the body, all of it becomes slightly less defined, slightly less insistent. This is the nervous system exhaling, a long, slow, quiet breath that began sometime in the early evening and is still, right now, continuing. There is a network of brain regions that becomes active when the mind is not focused on any particular task. Scientists call it the default mode network. During the day, it tends to operate in the background, present, but often overridden by the demands of attention, by conversations, by decisions, by the steady pull of things that need to be done. But as waking activity softens, as the nervous system continues its long exhale, the default mode network gradually moves to the foreground. It takes over in a quiet way, and with it comes a different quality of thought. Daydreaming, loose association. The mind moving from one thing to another without any particular direction or purpose. Not because something is wrong, but because the brain is no longer asking thought to be useful. It is simply letting thought move on its own, the way water moves when there is no current guiding it in any particular direction. Thoughts at this stage tend to lose their logical structure. One idea touches another without a clear connection. A memory from earlier in the day might appear briefly, and then something unrelated, and then something else entirely. The thread between them doesn't need to make sense. The brain is no longer insisting that it does. This can sometimes feel like distraction, or like the mind refusing to settle, but it is actually a sign that something is working correctly. The grip of waking cognition is loosening. The part of the brain that organizes and evaluates and keeps thoughts in order is stepping back, and what remains is something softer and more wandering. And then, somewhere in this drifting, something else begins to happen. Some people notice a sound, a word, or a name, or a short phrase that seems to arrive from nowhere, heard clearly, but without any source. Others notice a brief image, a face, a color, a simple shape appearing and dissolving before it can be examined. Some notice a sudden sensation, a feeling of movement, or a falling very slightly just at the edge of awareness. These experiences have a name. They are called hypnagogic phenomena, and they occur in the space between wakefulness and sleep. They are produced by the brain itself, arising without intention, without meaning that needs to be decoded. They are simply what happens when the mind begins to release its hold on waking reality, when the usual rules of thought become flexible, and the brain begins to generate its own experience rather than responding to the world outside. They are completely natural. They have been described by people across cultures and throughout recorded history. And they are, in their own quiet way, a signal, the brain moving into a different mode, a different relationship with experience. Part of what makes this possible is a change happening in a region called the thalamus. The thalamus sits near the center of the brain and acts, among other things, as a relay station for sensory information. During waking hours, it passes signals from the outside world, sounds, light, touch, up into the cortex, where they are processed and perceived. But as sleep approaches, the thalamus begins to close that gate, gradually and selectively. Sounds that would have reached awareness a short time ago are now filtered out before they arrive. The outside world continues, but the brain is no longer fully receiving it. Less information is passed through. Less of the environment reaches conscious experience. What remains is quieter, more internal. The space between one thought and the next grows a little longer. The thoughts themselves become lighter, less defined, more willing to drift without being followed. This is the border between waking and sleep. Not a sharp line, but a gradual fading, a slow, natural dissolving of the boundary between the two. The brain's electrical activity continues to change. Alpha waves, which accompanied the early stages of relaxation, begin to give way to something slower. These are called theta waves. They are broader, more spacious. They move through the brain at a gentler pace, fewer cycles per second, longer intervals between each one. Theta waves are associated with the lightest stages of sleep. They are also present in deep meditation, in states of very quiet rest. They carry with them a particular quality, a sense of being neither fully here nor fully gone. Awareness is still present, in some form, but it is softer now, less defined. The brain is settling into a new rhythm, and within this rhythm, two other things begin to appear. The first are called sleep spindles. They are brief bursts of rhythmic electrical activity, lasting only a second or two, arising and fading without any sensation on the part of the person experiencing them. Sleep spindles are generated by the thalamus, and their purpose, in part, is protective. They help maintain sleep in the presence of minor disturbances. A sound from outside, a small shift in the environment. They are the brain's way of continuing to filter, of keeping the outside world at a distance, without disrupting the sleep that is now beginning. The second are called K-complexes. A K-complex is a single, slow, smooth wave that moves through the brain in response to an external sound or sensation. If something is heard, a distant noise, a voice somewhere in the house, the brain produces one of these waves. It is a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition without alarm. The sound was registered, evaluated in the most minimal sense, and found to require no response. It is the brain saying, simply, that something was noted, and then moving on. Around this same time, deeper in the brain, the hippocampus begins its nightly work. The hippocampus is involved in memory, in the encoding and organizing of experiences. During the day, it absorbs a great deal, and now, in the early stages of sleep, it begins quietly processing what was gathered. Not urgently, not with any effort, just a slow background sorting. Experiences being gently organized, consolidated, set aside. This process requires nothing from the person sleeping. It happens entirely on its own. The hippocampus works through the night in its own quiet way, and by morning, some of what was experienced during the day will have settled more firmly into memory, without any conscious involvement at all. And through all of this, something else is changing as well. Awareness of the body softens. The edges of the self, the sense of where the body ends and the surrounding space begins, become less distinct. The weight of the limbs is still there, in some way, but it is no longer being actively felt. The surface beneath the body, the temperature of the air, the position of the hands, these things fade from attention without disappearing entirely. The boundary between inside and outside grows less clear. This is a natural part of early sleep. The brain is no longer maintaining the same careful map of the body's position and sensations that it held during waking hours. It is releasing that attention gradually, as it has been releasing so many other things throughout this evening. What remains is quiet, slow, still. The theta waves move through the brain at their own unhurried pace. The sleep spindles come and go. The hippocampus continues its gentle work, and the person lying in the dark moves without effort a little deeper into sleep. The brain waves slow further still. Theta waves, which carried the brain through the lighter stages of sleep, begin to give way to something even broader, even slower. These are called delta waves. They are the slowest of the brain's electrical rhythms, long, gradual waves that move through the brain with a great deal of space between each one. Delta waves are the signature of deep sleep. They don't arrive all at once. They appear gradually, first in small amounts, mixed in with the slower theta activity, and then more frequently as the brain descends further. Their presence marks a significant shift away from the border between waking and sleep and into something much quieter. As delta waves increase, blood flow within the brain redistributes. The regions associated with thinking, with language, with self-awareness, the regions that were active all day, that processed and evaluated and planned, receive less blood now, less oxygen, less of the fuel that active cognition requires. They are resting in a more complete way than they ever do during waking hours. Other regions take over. Quieter regions. Regions concerned not with thought, but with maintenance, with restoration, with the slow, necessary work of keeping the body well. Somewhere during this deepening, the pituitary gland releases growth hormone into the bloodstream. Growth hormone is involved in the repair of tissue, in the maintenance of cells, in many of the processes that keep the body functioning over time. It is released primarily during deep sleep, during these slow, quiet hours. The body uses this time not only to rest, but to attend to itself, to repair what the day has worn, to restore what has been used. This happens without any awareness, without any effort. It is simply part of what sleep is for. Around this same time, a system within the brain becomes more active that is less active during waking hours. It is called the glymphatic system, a network of channels that surrounds the brain's blood vessels. During sleep, and particularly during deep sleep, these channels widen. Cerebrospinal fluid moves more freely through them, flowing slowly through the brain's tissue. As it moves, it carries away metabolic byproducts, the waste that accumulates as a natural result of the brain's activity during the day. Proteins and other substances that, if allowed to build up over time, can affect the brain's functioning. The glymphatic system clears them away, quietly, during these deep hours. It is a kind of maintenance that can only fully occur when the brain is still. And the brain is very still now. Consciousness, if it is present at all, is barely there. Not a stream of thought, not even a drift of loose association. Something much quieter than that, a faint, formless awareness. If anything, without words, without images, without any particular content. The body is heavy and unmoving. The breath is slow and even. The nervous system is as quiet as it becomes. The brain is producing its long, slow delta waves, and the restorative work of the night has begun. There is nothing to do here, nothing to notice or follow or understand. Just this, the deep, ordinary quiet that the brain arrives at every night, without being asked, without any effort from the person it belongs to. It has always known how to do this, and it is doing it now. There is something worth noticing in a very quiet way about everything that has been described tonight. None of it required anything from you. The suprachiasmatic nucleus began its evening routine on its own. The pineal gland released melatonin without being asked. The parasympathetic nervous system gradually took over. The locus ceruleus quieted. The muscles released their tension. The thalamus closed its gates. All of it unfolding in its own time, in its own order, the way it has unfolded every night of your life. This process is not something that has to be learned or practiced or achieved. It is something the brain already knows, something it has always known, a sequence that begins on its own, continues on its own, and arrives where it is going without any guidance from the person it belongs to. It is, in that way, one of the most reliable things there is. Tonight, the light faded, and something in the brain registered that fading and began to respond. The nervous system, which had been gently active through the day, began its long exhale. The heart slowed. The breath deepened and spaced out. The chemicals of alertness grew quieter. Thoughts, which had been purposeful and directed, began to loosen. They drifted. They moved without connection, without destination. The default mode network wandered through its own soft landscape, and the thalamus began to close the door on the outside world, gently, without force. Brainwaves slowed. Alpha gave way to theta. Sleep spindles came and went, protecting the quiet that was forming. The hippocampus began its patient, unhurried work, and then, slowly, the deeper waves began, long and slow, the rhythm of a brain at rest. The glymphatic system opened. The body's repair began. Growth hormone moved through the bloodstream. The restorative work of the night, which asks nothing of the person sleeping, was already underway. All of that is still happening now. The brain is still doing what it knows how to do. The body is still settling. The nervous system is still quiet. Whatever stage of this process is present right now, Whether at the early edges of sleep or somewhere deeper, it is continuing on its own, without needing to be directed or encouraged or even noticed. There is nothing left to follow in these words. There is nothing that needs to be understood or remembered. The body is still. The breath is slow. The brain is doing its quiet, ancient work. Everything that needs to happen is already happening. All you have to do is nothing at all. Good night.